My parents threw me out at 18 for being pregnant. 22 years later, he saw my Forbes cover. My daughter. He cried. I replied, she died in the cold. You can call me Skylar Alston. My parents kicked me out of the house when I was 18 because I was expecting a child. That door banging shut is still audible to me. It was more than a night's end. A childhood came to an end. Whispering to a baby I would never be able to hold, I slept beneath bridges while trembling in the cold. That evening, I vowed to myself, they would eventually recall the name they attempted to remove. They returned 22 years later, nor to apologize, nor to beg for pardon. They returned to sue me for the empire I created from the ashes of their rejection, for the fortune I created out of nothing. They left me when I had nothing and wanted a piece of my success. However, they were unaware that I had spent my entire life anticipating this moment. The girl sobbing in the rain was no longer me. The storm was me. This is not merely a tale of retaliation. It has to do with rebirth. How suffering turned into strength and quiet into the most audible triumph. Welcome to Revenge House USA, where justice, transformation, and treachery are revealed in every episode. My twist will leave you gasping for air, so stay until the very end. Don't pass on the next turn of fate event. Watch the moment when everything changes by subscribing now. I can still smell Mom's candle burning cinnamon the night my life fell apart. Even our Portland home was quiet. I entered silently, carrying the small stick with the 2 pink lines on it. Like it didn't matter, Dad was reading through real estate listings, while seated at the kitchen table. The air froze when I muttered, I'm pregnant. Slowly, as if calculating the price of disappointment, he glanced up. Skylar, you're 18. All of our plans for you have just been ruined by you. Even though he spoke in such a quiet tone, it was more painful than if he had screamed. Mom didn't even give me a look. She simply put down her wine glass and mumbled, we expected better from a Halston. Then she said the words that completely broke my heart. They were bluffing, I thought, until Dad got up, took my luggage, and threw it close to the door. You're not welcome in this house anymore. After 12 minutes, he added, pack whatever you can. At this point, the family portrait from last Christmas was on the mantel, facing down. Like a final judgment, the sound of the frame striking wood reverberated. My lover, Bennett Cole, didn't pick up when I tried to call him. Do not contact Bennett again, his parents' attorney emailed me the next day. I became aware that I was all by myself. That night, the Oregon rain began, cold, unending, and critical. I slept beneath a bus stop, using my rucksack as a pillow, covering my stomach with one hand, and apologizing in a whisper to the unnamed baby. As they went past, people pretended not to notice the girl with the trembling hands and puffy eyes. Each drop of rain felt like a penalty. Every wind gust served as a reminder of my loss. By the 4th night, my hunger was so intense that I was afraid I would go away. I silently vowed as I gazed at the rising light at the break of dawn. Every cry they caused me to shed will be regretted by them. They will choke on their own hubris as I soar to such heights. The dutiful daughter, Skylar Alston, passed away at that same moment. Then another thing emerged. A silent, ruthless fire. When you have nowhere to go, Portland nights seem to drag on forever. I no longer felt cold by the middle of the 2nd week. I was more afraid of that than the rain. I discovered which coffee shops allowed you to sit for warming without having to make a purchase. Which alleys were safe from intoxicated people. The least amount of rotten food was found in the dumpsters beside Powell's bookshop. Living was not survival. It was simply keeping me moving so that the discomfort wouldn't stop me. Without me, the city moved on. Dad was still a real estate agent. Mom continued to host her brunches for charity. I watched families laughing through glass windows that I was no longer able to touch while I resided in between street lamps. I would squeeze my knees together and mutter, I'm sorry, to the unborn child developing inside of me at night. I'll figure something out. I swear, yet assurances didn't satisfy a hunger. I wanted to scream when Bennett's words, we'll figure it out together, replayed in my mind. They didn't warm frozen fingers. Like an email he no longer needed, he erased me. And the rejection from my parents was not as painful as the silence of his absence. The 3rd month was particularly difficult. One morning, I woke up faint and lightheaded beside a grocery shop. I giggled as a man who was walking by tossed a penny and said, get help. Who is the source of the assistance? I didn't have a family, friends, or address, and nobody would even mention my name. Then, the fever struck. Like everyone else, my body had deceived me. I recall passing out close to the Wamut River. As my vision became blurry, I heard the sound of water blending with vehicles. I briefly believed that this might be it. It might have been simpler to end the war. However, I managed to stay awake long enough to crawl beneath a bridge because of something small but ferocious that was inside of me. Dawn light was creeping across the concrete when I woke up. I was overshadowed by a stranger, an elderly woman with a cup of coffee, wearing a wool coat, and a scarf blowing in the wind. She said, you'll catch your death out here. I hadn't heard such warmth in months from her voice. I wanted to tell her to stop staring at me like I was important and to go away. But I was unable to look her in the eyes. There was recognition instead of sympathy, as if she had been in my shoes before. She gave the cup to me. Sip this. Aurora is my name. My tongue was scorched by the coffee. For the first time, the warmth persisted. Then something changed that morning. At last, the girl who had been dying in silence for months began to breathe. The scent of rain and lavender filled the car. I was sitting somewhere warm for the first time in months. Aurora Mercer's hands held the driving wheel with a serene assurance that comes only from having survived your own battles. The hum of the heater was broken by her words. Consume. Avoid arguing. She handed me a wax paper wrapped sandwich. I ate it all up before noticing that tears were streaming down my cheeks. Aurora remained unflinching. You haven't been seen for long enough, have you? Her remark struck a deep chord. Since that night, no one had seen me. Not really. She took me to her house, a remodeled farmhouse on the outskirts of Portland, where I could hear rain hitting metal roofs in the distance and old pines all around. Murphy, her golden retriever, waggled his tail as though I was already a part of it. I couldn't sleep the first night, but she showed me a spare room with a clean bed, a folded blanket, and a note on the nightstand that said, "You're safe here." I kept expecting her to have second thoughts, to contact the police, or to tell me that I wasn't worthy of consolation. However, Aurora merely stated, "Coffee is ready," when morning arrived. "You'll assist me at the restaurant after that." The Maple Hearth was a tiny, downtown eatery with wood paneling that smelled of hope and butter. It belonged to her and 3 other people who lived all throughout Oregon. I learned to walk fearlessly, clean dishes, and wipe tables. The dignity was invaluable, but the remuneration was meager. Months passed. Aurora started teaching me more than just how to survive, how to read people, how to transform brutality into inspiration. As we closed the register one evening, she remarked, "Skylar, you don't fight fire with tears. You create and manage a fire that is larger than theirs." I remembered that sentence. She taught me about contracts, expenses, and corporate earnings, but there was more to each lesson than meets the eye. Patience, strategy, and moderation. She would stir her tea and advise against hasty retaliation. They are easier to break the longer they believe you are broken. I took it all in. I discovered how to look confident even when I didn't have any. When males raised their voices, I stopped shaking. I began to save money. $25 at first, then $350, and finally enough to get back on my feet. She gave me a silver locket one evening. There was a quote engraved in little characters within. "Rise softly, then let out a yell." Her gaze grew softer. "You make me think of someone I was once, Mom." As the rain drummed against the window that evening, I came to the realization that Aurora Mercer had done more than save my life. She was creating a different me. From the ashes of rejection, the girl who once pleaded for love was learning how to create an empire. And a new feeling started to resurface someplace deep within, under serenity and thankfulness, waiting, cold, and intent. Books were not the source of Aurora's lessons. They originated from wounds. She would test me every morning at the Maple Hearth with people rather than numbers. "Look at that pair?" As she cleaned the counter, she would whisper, "He is making up something." Observe her hands. I became adept at interpreting subtle facial emotions. Fear, greed, guilt, like if it were a second language. She would show me the business of survival, supply lines, inventories, and payrolls at night by opening her ledger. She once remarked that money is more than just power. There is quiet. It allows you to go without having to give a single explanation. I couldn't get that line off my chest. I had changed from the shaky girl who had slept under bridges by the early summer. I was more observant, methodical, and in charge. I was promoted to assistant manager by Aurora, and I signed my name on a payroll form for the first time without feeling embarrassed. She presented me to Daniel Cross, her lawyer, a man in his mid-40s with the cool eyes of someone who's seen too much and a dry sense of humor. Aurora informed me, "If you ever intend to own anything, you'll need a legal backbone. When it counts, Daniel is one of the few people who will remain silent." Daniel discussed trusts, property rights, and inheritance law gaps during late-night coffee talks. Learning how to safeguard something I didn't yet have was strangely reassuring. I got to know Silas Reyes, an IT professional who worked with Aurora's digital systems in the interim. Silas was all rapid typing, silent disobedience, and black sweatpants. He showed me how to erase data, track digital footprints, and make information vanish when necessary. He remarked, "Every empire leaves crumbs. Your role is to manage who consumes them." Aurora observed me cultivate relationships she knew would endure beyond her lifetime. I could see it in her smile, but she never spoke it aloud. She was preparing me for more than just survival. Life then put me to the test once more. On a late January morning, it occurred. The pain was abrupt, intense, and unrelenting. It was too late by the time Daniel took me to the hospital. I had lost the child I had borne over those frightful and hungry months. Numb, I gazed at the ceiling tiles. The physicians whispered their sympathies. None of them were audible to me. The night my parents kicked me out, all I could think was that they had killed my first child. Aurora held my hand as she sat next to my bed. She spoke in a steady, low voice. She said, "You lost something valuable. Don't lose yourself again, though. You'll create a better version of yourself." It took months to get back on her feet. But I was different when I did. I remained under skin. Aurora assisted me in submitting adoption paperwork for Milo, a baby boy who had been left at a shelter outside of Salem. His little fingers encircled mine like a vow as I held him. "You'll never be alone like I was," I whispered, and Skylar Alston was no longer the victim after that day. She was a woman who was meticulously reconstructing her world, and every instruction Aurora had ever imparted to me was set to serve as the cornerstone of an untouchable kingdom. Years merged into a stable state. Quiet precision took the place of the anguish. Skylar Alston was no longer the lost girl under the bridge by the time she was in her early 30s. Her name was a whisper in Portland's corporate community. After Aurora's restaurant chain grew, Skylar digitalized it by implementing online branding, delivery services, and mobile reservations. Her concepts increased revenue. When she spoke, investors paid attention. She grinned as she passed their former neighborhood and purchased her first condo downtown, the same zip code her parents used to boast about. Out of triumph, not nostalgia, Milo developed quickly. Observant, restless mind. As she worked, he would sit beside her laptop and inquire as to what income meant or why suit-clad individuals argued on the news. Skylar signed him up for robotics classes, summer challenges throughout Oregon, and coding camps. He created a tiny app at the age of 11 that tracked restaurant waste and streamlined orders. He received a National Tech Prize at the age of 14. Reporters referred to him as the Oregon prodigy who was revolutionizing restaurant technology. And Skylar, I guess. Standing behind the camera, she saw that the youngster who shared her last name was more brilliant than any person she had ever met. However, avarice and fame spread quickly. Skylar froze one evening while she was reading business papers. Local genius Milo Alston partners with Invent Group, the company owned by her parents. Her heart paused when she saw the news. Naturally, it was untrue, but it indicated that they had taken note of him. A stylish envelope showed up at her office a few days later. There was a letter from Reagan and Robert Halston inside. Her parents pretended to be affectionate. Reconnecting would be wonderful. Milo is entitled to know his relatives. Family? It was a stinging word. Her IT specialist, Silas, raised an eyebrow when she presented it to him. "Do you want me to follow their digital footprint?" Skylar grinned. "Each email, each click." Silas discovered searches from her parents' IP address, grandparent rights, Oregon, inheritance claims through grandkids, and legal reconnection for family estates in less than 10 days. They were looking for power, not for forgiveness. Like Aurora had taught her, Skylar developed her strategy slowly, surgically, and silently. Her response was well crafted. "It's been a while. I waited, but I'm willing to communicate." She allowed her calligraphy to waver in notes and her tone to falter during calls. She seemed to them remorseful, vulnerable, and willing to make amends. They were drawn in by each emotional lure. In the meantime, all of the calls, texts, and money transfers connected to the Halston scheme were captured on Silas's servers. Daniel prepared strong trusts that would disprove any fraudulent claim after reviewing Oregon's inheritance laws. Her parents believed they were enticing her. They were unaware that they were entering her web directly. Bennett Cole, the high school ghost who was now broke, desperate, and conveniently back in town, then appeared. One night his voicemail came in. "Your folks contacted you, Lyd. For Milo's sake, perhaps it's time for us to speak." For Milo's benefit. She nearly laughed at the irony. Rain stained the glass of the penthouse window as Skylar gazed out. Under the rain, Portland's skyline glistened, with ghostly shifting reflections. "You all had your chance," she muttered, setting the trap such that she would be the one holding the handle when the door crashed this time. On a Wednesday morning, the letter arrived, printed on heavy, entitled-seeming paper. The seal of the Halston family gave me a fierce look. Dad used to say that the engraved crest represented legacy. It now represented greed. The contents of the document were worse than I had anticipated. A case brought on the grounds of family financial interest and grandparent visitation rights. To put it plainly, they were suing me to get access to Milo and a cut of the money made by my business. I nearly laughed at the arrogance. Nearly. My lawyer, Daniel Cross, did not blink as he read the pages. He stated that they are referring to family repair clauses and emotional harm. Traditional manipulation. They want to force you to settle and force you into negotiations. I spoke calmly as I leaned back. We should then offer them exactly what they desire. He grinned. The smile that conceals strategy. Don't you already have a plan? I did, of course. Silas Reyes had been monitoring their emails, browsing history, and encrypted chats for weeks. She had discovered private exchanges between Bennett Cole, the same lad who abandoned me in the rain 17 years prior, and my parents. If he assisted in re-establishing family relations, they would give him a portion of my fortune. One of Dad's messages said, "Play her emotions. Bring up the boy." They were unaware that I had been reading every word in real time, but she would fold. So I went along with it. Neutral Ground, a coffee cafe on the east side, is where I first met Bennett. Behind a salesman's smile, he appeared hollow and aged. He said, "You look different." I took a drink of my latte. "I'm unique." He leaned forward. "All your parents desire is to be involved in Milo's life. He has a right to know his origins." I put down my cup. "He is aware of his origins." A woman who persisted. He winced. Bennett would have quarreled in the past. Like a good little informant, the new one checked his phone, most likely to give my parents an update. I texted Silas once that evening. They have fallen for the ruse. Their activities increased within a day. Bennett and Robert Halston's late-night phone conversations and encrypted texts regarding the division of possible settlements. Everything was archived by Silas. Daniel started drafting countersuits, claiming extortion efforts, mental suffering, and defamation. But patience was needed for the last stage. I disclosed a fake trust clause that said Milo's future assets were contingent only on my consent. The attorney for my parents contacted me for an urgent mediation within a day. They had taken it at face value. I saw it as art, but Daniel labeled it a legal snare. The Halstons were allegedly back in town, suing their arranged daughter for money, according to public rumors that soon surfaced. Their once flaunting social circles now turned against them. Their decades-long facade of perfection started to crumble. I saw control rather than fear when I looked into the mirror of my penthouse, which I had purchased myself, on the day of the initial hearing. I straightened my blazer, pinned my hair back, and said to the reflection, "You threw me away." They believed this was their chance to make a comeback. Now, I get to choose who leaves. However, it was the opening act for me. They would sue me in more than just the courtroom. I would bury the last remnant of my former self there. Even though I wasn't the girl outside the door, the day of the hearing felt familiar. The others were going to be shut out, and I was the only one inside. Reporters flocked to the courthouse in downtown Portland. In their press leak, my parents portrayed themselves as grieving grandparents hoping to reunite with their arranged daughter and grandson. After a day, I made sure it didn't work. Silas had planned the ideal drop. Screenshots of my parents' encrypted conversations with Bennett, which demonstrate their money extortion scheme. The headlines had shifted from family reunions in court to Halstons being accused of a deceptive lawsuit by the time the news cycle reached noon. Nevertheless, they arrived dressed in elegant suits, posing as victims. My dad's jaw was clenched. Like a stage prop, my mother clutched her pearls. Behind them, Bennett stood, nervous and pale. He didn't even understand the game, and he was the weakest pawn. The room fell silent as Judge Leo Whitaker walked in. Cameras swung. The city was observing. Calmly, Daniel opened our side. "Your Honor, my client wants some evidence to be made public before we move forward with their claim because it directly affects the plaintiff's credibility." The magistrate gave a nod. "Go ahead." The lights in the courtroom went down. The screen behind the witness stand was illuminated by a projector. The first email then showed up. "Recovering Skylar's fortune from Robert Halston is the subject. 2. Cole, Bennett, make use of the boy. Regain her trust. We will demand legal access once she has softened. We file if she doesn't comply." The room echoed with a gasp. Like predators, reporters leaned forward. Voice recordings, phone conversations, and transaction logs followed, each one more damning than the one before it. "This isn't right, Robert," Bennett begged, his voice breaking over the speaker. The icy response from my father was, "She'll find out. She is too sensitive to defend herself." Sweetly, the irony stung. I remained composed, intentional. "Your Honor," I said in a steady voice. "I was kicked out for being pregnant 22 years ago. I was called a disgrace by them, and now, after all this time, they returned for money rather than love." I turned to them after pausing. "Would you like to see my son? Fine. He isn't yours, though. I built everything you left behind, so he's mine." There was an overwhelming quiet. The judge's pen even froze in midair. Daniel then delivered the last blow, a notarized document that was signed by Reagan and Robert Halston 22 years earlier, giving up all parental rights in order to protect their reputation. Their signatures were displayed in black and white on the courtroom screens. The color faded from my mother's face. My dad made an attempt to talk. "That isn't relevant." But when the crowd erupted, his voice trailed off. The judge struck once with his gavel. The case was dropped. Every claim is rejected. Next, it's colder but softer. Additionally, the court suggests looking into any attempted fraud. Security moved forward. The cameras flashed. Reporters yelled inquiries. Under a flurry of camera lights, my parents squirmed in their seats as officers led them out. Hunted by shame and headlines that would follow him for years, Bennett slipped away, head low.